intro class. I know that it was a bit unconventional that I requested that you write a paper before we even had our first class, but I thought it was really important to kind of hit the ground running and set a baseline for what I expect out of you for this class, because it's more than just a class that you take for fun or a class to, fulfill your GPA requirements for your major. It's also a representation of me to say that you came to one of my classes and survived. So let's get into it, and then I'll talk more about your papers. So this semester, we are going to be focusing on female writers, and I think it's just as impressive when a male writer writes, but you also have to consider the time period when these works were produced. They were being written by women, sometimes who had to publish under a man's name, and it just wasn't really expected for women to be major writers. So they just had a lot of odds against them. So I think it is appropriate for us to kind of give them the respect that they deserve. You will not be able to just read the Cliff Note versions of these books and then write papers on them and get through this class that way. I actually have the Cliff Notes versions of all of them, and so I specifically will be looking for things that are in the book that will prove to me that you actually read it, and not just read it, but also understand it, because they're amazing. And if you get a passing grade in this class, it shows that you have a mastery of at least the books that we've gone over. So some examples of what we'll be reading. I know Jane Austen is something that every high school girl has read, but we will be reading on a different level, taking in the time period that it was written, and just Jane Austen as a person, that she was extremely strong, that she never married despite writing lots of famous books about love. It seems like she had an idea of in her head of what love was, and presumably she never found that in her real life, so she never settled and married and had kids like pretty much every other woman in her time period did. And it's just, she held herself and love to a higher standard. So we are going to be reading Pride and Prejudice, which is much deeper than it sounds. It's kind of our lower, entry level to the course, but again, not just the Cliff Notes. We're also going to be reading Wuthering Heights, which a lot of people don't know is written by a woman. I think this is important, especially for the time period, because it showed vulnerability of a man, because Heathcliff really pines, and I know it was popular to be romantic in the 19th century, but I don't think it was as widely accepted for a man to not humiliate himself, but to bring himself down to the point of that a woman's actually so important that she could possibly be above him. And I would appreciate if you would get this version, because it actually shows landmarks, so you can kind of get a feel of the area they're talking about and not just read the words on the paper. It kind of gets you completely immersed in that. I want you to feel like you're in the 19th century whenever you're reading these books. I don't want you to just read them for a while, put them down, because you might even need to read them a couple of times to get to the level of depth that you will need to get a passing grade in this class. And I know that that sounds harsh, but it's really for your benefit, because if you want to major in English literature, I'm not doing you any favors by letting you get through the class and never actually have in-depth knowledge of any of these classics. So it's really my job. And it upholds the image of the university, because if we are sending people out into the world with half-done majors, it doesn't really say anything good about us. We're also going to look at Mansfield Park, which is a slightly lesser known Austen novel. I know 2 Austens, it's actually 3. We might not touch on this one as briefly. I might have you do, like, not a footnote, but like more of an essay, and not as much of like the 20 or 30 page papers that we're going to be doing on the other ones. But I do think that this is important for you to have read. Emma should be the most enjoyable, I would think, especially because of all of the times it's been remade in present times, like how the movie Clueless was based off Emma. All the characters in this are represented in the movie Clueless, so that's kind of an interesting twist. One of my one of my pupils thought that they could get away with watching the movie Clueless and writing the paper on that and just substituting the words, the names of the characters like they did in Clueless, substituting them for the book. They absolutely failed, and I didn't even want them in my class again, so they actually had to go through a different English professor the following year. But that won't happen with you, so you don't need to worry about it. But Emma is a very good example of a very strong-willed woman who doesn't want to settle for what society wants of her. It doesn't seem like she really wants to just go for any old man. She's perfectly content living at home with her father, you know, helping him because he's in poor health, than she ever is in marrying, making babies, and, you know, fulfilling what society expected of her. So she was all right with the idea of being a spinster. It just happens that a long-standing friendship bloomed into love in this book, which I know, spoiler alert, but trust me, you're going to have to read these enough times that spoiler alerts will not matter. But anyone who doesn't feel comfortable or doesn't feel like they need to read the book multiple times or put the amount of effort into this class that you really will need to get a passing grade, I might have to make you come to my office and we'll have to really discuss exactly what you're going to need to do to pass the class. I might even need to give you extra papers, extra assignments, because just showing up, reading the books, and writing the paper is just like a one-off like you do with all your other classes, just really isn't going to fly. This is a core class for your major, and if you can't pass this, then you don't deserve to have the degree. So I think I'm approachable though. I mean, I want you to understand it. I'm just not going to hold your hand like how they lie to you in high school and say, oh, you know, not everyone's going to have a calculator in their pocket. Everyone writes in cursive, you know, back in the olden days whenever I was in school. But now everyone does have a calculator in their pocket and no one writes in cursive. But what I'm saying is true. You need to thoroughly understand the text and be able to portray it in writing, or you won't be able to say that you were able to pass this class. Another very, very important work from this time period that we're going to be discussing. We might actually spend the most time on it, which is one of the shortest ones. So if you need to read this 3 or 4 times, it's not as painful as, or time consuming as reading the other ones 3 or 4 times. That would be Frankenstein. If any of you leave this class calling Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein like it's his name, I'll find you. So Mary Shelley wrote Frankenstein, which was even more groundbreaking than Jane Austen, the Charlotte Bronte sisters, Bronte. It's a French class. It's not a French class, it's an English class. Because they wrote about romance. Frankenstein is not about romance. It does not have a female lead. I mean, she wrote about things that women weren't supposed to write about, nevertheless. They weren't supposed to think about, nevertheless, write about monsters. And it just, different from the other books, it really strikes chords on loneliness and being able to put yourself in Frankenstein's monster's shoes. Frankenstein's creation shoes. Adam, his name was Adam, and really be able to project yourself onto being created and trying to find your purpose in life. It's even more difficult than being a human, where you had parents who just more or less decided to have you and then raise you up in the world and you go off into it. That Adam was created by a kind of mad scientist, and then without any really thought about what was going to happen afterwards. Frankenstein was so focused on being able to create create life, even though it wasn't traditional life, that he didn't really think about the repercussions of what would happen with his creation once he succeeded. So Adam feels lonely. He doesn't feel like he belongs because he doesn't. And it's just the disaster of what can happen when you make such a big decision like Frankenstein did without thinking about what will happen from your actions. So this is the most important book that we're going to be reading this semester. It will be the last one that we review, because I want you to have your skills as honed as they possibly can be before we approach this. Another side note I should probably warn you about, because it has led to many people's follies, is I am a stickler for grammar. Because if you are going to say that you majored in anything regarding the English language, you should not submit a paper that has the wrong there, or any words that are not actually in the dictionary. If you don't know where to put a comma, you probably shouldn't be majoring in this. And this isn't even a grammar class. You've had those since you started school. This is to ensure that the quality of person who passes my class is able to form multiple correct sentences in a row and then string them together in a coherent way. I know it sounds like a very low bar, but surprisingly it is not. Again, if that seems beyond you, you will have to come in during my office hours and we will have to figure out a way. Because as much as I only want to pass the people that I fully feel like deserve it, the administration has talked to me about my lower than average passing percentage. So I'm having to give extra help to people who don't have the innate ability to reread papers or edit themselves. So I have been helping people along, but don't think that you're just going to turn up to my office and come with some half-written paper and just turn it over to me, and then I'll, hold your hand and write in red pen where everything you should change. You're going to have to sit there and work through it with me. And if you can't make my office hours, or if you need even more help than my office hours allow, I might have to have you come to my home, but I would really rather not do that. I'm just needing to make those passing grades, but I cannot put an A or a B or a C on a paper that does not meet my expectations. So be it if I have to help you bring it up to my expectations, but you are still going to have to put in work. And if you have already bought the Cliff Notes to these and think you're just going to sail through this class, you should go ahead and drop it. Well, we should probably talk about the papers I had you write before you came in this first day. Yes, you and you need to stay after, because we need to go over what has happened in text and was emailed to me. Because I think it would be better, rather than me having to fail you and that add to my failing percentage, we just kind of assess together whether or not this is going to be able to be a good fit for you, or if you need to major in something else. All right. Well, I do have office hours right after this class, so if one of you wants to show up to that, we can go over your paper then. But other than that, I hope that you enjoy this class. I hope that you learn a lot. I have no doubt that you will. And as long as we all play nicely and pull in the same direction, I think that it will be a very fruitful semester for all of us. Most of us. Well, thank you. And I will see you later this week.